We're back 2 minutes away from the Ring of Honor. If we did a Ring of Honor for guests, our next one would certainly be a major candidate. As long as he paid us enough money in advance, we would probably make sure Chris Marler ended up in the Ring of Honor. Chris, what's up?
Not much, not much. I was listening to the everything before you brought me on here, and the Ole Miss stuff and the ESPN FPI. It was wild. It was a wild week. I'm glad we have a lot of off-season fodder.
We count on you to tell us what we don't know, all the little crevices of the SEC and elsewhere. So what are we missing here on this very establishment-oriented show?
So I think the thing with the FPI in general that I always try to bring up ad nauseum is it's great to have some sort of metric and analytics and numbers to look at and give us something to talk about. But the thing I always go back to is like you have to take this with a grain of salt because this is the same system that in 2019 they had Alabama ranked ahead of LSU for 2 weeks after LSU beat Alabama. So it's something to get like up in arms about. I do think it's interesting of everything we've heard this entire offseason about the two teams that are kind of like, I don't want to say dark horses, but they're not usually in contention for Atlanta, let alone the college football playoff, is Ole Miss and Mizzou. And only one of those teams was in the top 20 or so. And the other part of it is the fact that like you look at the strength of schedules and just the top 25 in general, and it's absolutely loaded with SEC teams once again. And I think all like 15 or 16 of the teams were in the top 25 minus Vanderbilt.
Chris Marler with us. Chris, let's talk about Alabama because that seems to be something you have a vague interest in. No Saban. What about Deboer? What's your early read?
First off, we got to get him some new shorts. Those cargo shorts at the golf tournament were tough. That was a tough scene for all of us to see. I think it's still a little bit of a culture shock when you see the things that are going on in Tuscaloosa, not in a bad way or anything like that, but just the way that they both run their program is just very, very different. And I think he's done a great job. He's proved everyone wrong so far. I wonder what it looks like this fall because when you look at Bama's schedule and the amount of players they lost, I mean they lost a ton of talent. They had like a 41 players that like leave in the portal. You didn't bring in that much to replace it. You lost a ton in the secondary, and not to mention everyone they lost in the draft as well. I think the thing that is interesting to see here in the fall with Bama and Kalen Deboer is they could go 9-3 and have a really, really good season. And I wonder what the expectations and the perception of that would be, not only in Tuscaloosa, but around the SEC. Like, is DeBoer in over his head or can he not compete in the SEC, whatever? Because that schedule is brutal. There's not really an easy stretch at any point on it.
Chris Marler with us. But Chris, I hear what you're saying about what he's lost, but it doesn't seem to stop people in our industry from piling on the praise and talking about everything he's done, all the reasons he got the job, talking about everything he's done right. And so I'm confused. I mean, I'm buying in right along with everyone else. I mean, I get a little uptight when I hear what you said because I know it's true. But are we giving him too much credit?
I don't think we're giving him too much credit. I think it's good to operate from that place, like before he even coaches his first game, instead of a place of pessimism and negativity and all that kind of stuff, because you're going to see a ton of that anyway. I think the thing I always go back to is this. If you were asking me which coach that was available that's not Kirby Smart, that you would want to build a program with after Saban, the first coach that would come to mind if it's not Kirby Smart was Dan Lanning. He's young. He's in that tree. He knows how to recruit. He understands the importance of like getting guys in the trenches, all that kind of stuff. You didn't get Dan Lanning. I don't know if they actually offered him or anything like that, but you did get the guy that beat him 3 times in 2 years. So I think the one thing that's going to be that's like I don't want to say a feather in the cap, but it's also just something that has to make you feel a little bit optimistic if you're a Bama fan. This is the most talent he is ever going to have had on a team and a roster since he's been a head coach. And that's a team that had 3 receivers drafted from last year. Michael Penix gets drafted in the top 10 because the Falcons are awful. There's a lot of talent on that roster still. And I think that when you see his track record from what he's been able to do without that kind of talent, that's got to make you feel good.
So understanding what's left, understanding what they have, understanding who the coach is, 9-3 does sound pretty good. But what if you had to find concerns beyond what you've laid out? What are they about Alabama?
Well, again, the cargo shorts, I keep coming back to that. That's the first one. Not the secondary. I mean, you lost two that like could have been first round draft picks with Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terry Arnold. You lost Caleb Downs, who's arguably the best safety in the country as a freshman. I mean, you lost a lot of really good talent. Now I will say this, like on the back end of that secondary or of that defense, there are concerns. You don't have necessarily a elite receiver. You don't have a household name yet, but they are going to put up numbers just because of the offense. The other thing that I think is a positive is that offensive line last year. You heard it when we were in Nashville last year, and Tyler Booker talked about how we want to play joyless murder ball. We're going to come out here and do this and this, and we're going to get back to the way Bama used to be, like in that early run during the dynasty with Saban. That was the worst offensive line statistically in the history of the program. They gave up 49 sacks. They gave up 49 sacks, which is 11 more than Georgia had given up in the last 3 years combined. That offensive line gave up more sacks than Oregon, Washington, Michigan, and Georgia combined. So there has to be some improvement up front. I think that's where it has to start if you're going to have anything over 9 wins.
Chris Marler with us. Chris, what about Texas? Everybody can't wait to see them. Are you as high on them as others?
I think we all knew what Texas was and like the entitlement and the arrogance, all that kind of stuff. It's one of the reasons they're going to fit in well in the conference. But my God, like, I'm not saying that we should bully Texas when they came into the league or haze them a little bit, but like this schedule they got, it's a joke. It's a joke. I mean, like, they are going to be a really good football team, especially in the NIL era, and especially with Sark. He's done a tremendous job turning that thing around. But at the same time, it's shocking to me that this is an actual schedule they got in year one in the SEC. Vandy, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, back to back to back. I mean, that's unreal. And you really didn't see that anywhere else. You definitely didn't see it with Oklahoma. So I think they're going to be good. I think they're going to be good. I think they're at least going to win probably 10 games. But the other part of it with Texas is that they did lose a lot of talent. Like, I mean, they lost Xavier Worthy. They lost A.D. Mitchell. They lost their starting receiver, or starting tight end, another receiver. They lost 2 very, very elite defensive tackles right in the middle of that line. Are they going to be able to compete in the trenches like from day one in the SEC? That's the only question I would really have. And the other thing also, if we're being honest, Quinn Ewers, as much praise as he's gotten, what's his moment? Like besides the Bama game, like what's his career moment that he's had? I feel like it's not escaping me because there isn't one. So I'm not as high on him being like one of the best top 3 to 5 quarterbacks in the country. I think he could probably struggle this year.
We had a guest on the other day, Sam Webb. He covers Michigan, and he got a lot of excitement. He created a lot of excitement around the Big Ten and other places for what he said about Ryan Day. I don't know. I'm assuming you heard that since I think I saw you tweet something about it.
So here's the thing. I always say, if we're going to talk about sports, we're going to do it in facts and logical things. I understand like the dumb argument about Ryan Day and how he's underachieved or he's going to be in the hot seat if he loses to Michigan again. This is a coach that has more first-round draft picks than losses as a head coach. Like you look at his record, and it's not just because they're playing in the Big Ten. It's not just because he has, he's able to recruit well. All of those things fall back on the coach and how great he's been as a head coach. I think they're like 56-8 as a head coach. There's, I believe, only one of those losses outside the Mizzou game last year in the bowl game. I think only one of those losses is outside the top 10. I mean, they've lost to Clemson, who played in the national championship 2019. They lost to, obviously, Bama in 2020. They lost to Georgia in that heartbreaker in 2022. These losses have been like very close for the most part, and they've been to elite teams. I don't know what we're doing here. And for Michigan, of all teams, to be the one to get to like kind of beat their chest on that is, I'm very excited that Harbaugh's gone, Connor Stalions is gone, and we get to get back to putting shoving Michigan into a locker, because it was a great season a year ago. But the Ryan Day slander about him not being an elite coach with a 56-8 record, more first-round picks than losses, what are we talking about?
Well, some people are wondering about a championship before too long. Chris Marler joining us. Hey, thanks very much, Chris. We will talk to you soon. We head to the break. We will continue with your phone calls, a couple of other guests, but when we come back, the moment of truth will be here. Who will join Bobby, Jim from Crestwood, Tammy, and Shane in the ring of honor.